The Montana sunset painted the horizon in shades of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the dusty road that wound its way through the valley. Elena Parker clutched the steering wheel of her ancient Subaru, its back seat filled with everything she owned in the world: a suitcase, a cardboard box of books, and a glass terrarium housing Mr. Slowpoke, the red-eared slider turtle who had been her only constant companion for the past 7 years. The sign ahead read, "Welcome to Whispering Pines, population 827. Soon to be 828, she thought, if they'd have her." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her GPS sputtered and died as the mountains rose around her, cutting off what little signal remained. The crumpled newspaper ad sat on the passenger seat, its edges worn from constant handling. Ranch hand needed, room and board, no experience required. It had been a desperate measure, answering an ad for a job halfway across the country, but desperation was all Elena had left after the foreclosure, the layoff, and the humiliating return to her hometown that had lasted all of 3 weeks before she knew she had to escape. The Diamondback Ranch appeared before her as the road curved around a stand of ponderosa pines, a sprawling complex of weathered buildings nestled against the foothills. The main house stood proud despite its age, a 2-story log structure with a wide porch and chimney stacks that promised warmth against the coming autumn chill. Beyond it stretched outbuildings, barns, and in the distance, the silver ribbon of a creek cutting through pastureland, where cattle grazed under the watchful eye of the mountains. Elena parked beside a battered pickup truck, her hands trembling slightly as she checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. 32 years old and starting over again. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, testimony to 3 days of driving with minimal stops. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her face, once carefully made up for her corporate job in Seattle, was bare of everything except freckles and fear. "Come on, Mr. Slowpoke," she murmured, lifting the terrarium from the back seat. "Let's see if anyone's home." She had barely set foot on the porch steps when the front door swung open. The man who filled the doorway seemed hewn from the same rough timber as the house itself, tall and solid, with shoulders broadened by years of physical labor. His face, tanned and weathered by sun and wind, was partially obscured by a short beard shot through with silver that belied the relative youth in his eyes. Those eyes, a striking hazel that caught the fading sunlight, narrowed slightly as they took in Elena and her unusual luggage. "You must be Elena Parker," he said, his voice a low rumble that matched his imposing presence. "Jackson Miller." "We spoke on the phone." Elena nodded, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance and the absurdity of arriving at a cattle ranch with a turtle. "That's me. And this is Mr. Slowpoke," she added, lifting the terrarium slightly. To her surprise, the corner of Jackson's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Ma'am, in 20 years of running this ranch, you're the first applicant to bring a reptile to the interview." "He doesn't take up much space," Elena said quickly. "And he's very quiet. I couldn't leave him behind." Something in her voice must have communicated the desperation behind those words, because Jackson's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He stepped back, holding the door open wider. "Well, come on in then, both of you. Dinner's almost ready, and we can talk about the job while we eat." The interior of the ranch house was a study in practical comfort. Solid furniture built to last, walls adorned with local landscapes and family photographs, a stone fireplace dominating one wall of the great room. The scent of something savory wafted from the kitchen, making Elena suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd eaten anything besides gas station sandwiches. "Set your turtle friend down anywhere," Jackson said, leading her toward the kitchen. "The job comes with a cabin of your own. Nothing fancy, but it's got heat, running water, and decent insulation. Should be plenty of room for you and your cold-blooded companion." Elena placed Mr. Slowpoke's terrarium on a side table, murmuring a quick promise to return, and followed Jackson into a large, country-style kitchen where a pot bubbled on the stove. "I hope you like beef stew," he said, moving to stir the contents. "It's what we've got tonight." "It smells wonderful," Elena replied honestly. "Can I help with anything?" Jackson gestured toward a loaf of bread on the cutting board. "You can slice that if you like. Plates are in that cabinet to your right." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the routine of preparing a meal together feeling strangely intimate for two people who had just met. Elena couldn't help noticing the way Jackson moved around his kitchen, efficient and practiced, but with a hesitation in certain moments that suggested this had once been someone else's domain. As they settled at the large oak table with steaming bowls of stew, Jackson studied her with that same careful gaze. "So, Miss Parker, Elena, please." "Elena," he amended. "Your resume said you worked in corporate marketing for 8 years. What brings a city professional to apply for ranch work in Montana?" The question was direct but not unkind. Elena dipped her spoon into the stew, buying herself a moment to decide how much truth to offer this stranger. "Life changes," she said finally. "The company I worked for downsized after the pandemic fully hit their revenue. Then the housing market in Seattle went crazy, and I couldn't afford to stay after losing my income. I tried moving back to my hometown in Ohio, but—" She trailed off, the humiliation of those weeks still too raw. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "But?" Jackson prompted gently. Elena met his eyes, deciding that if she was going to live and work here, honesty was the only foundation worth building on. But sometimes you can't go home again. Too many expectations, too many people who think they know who you are or should be. I needed a fresh start somewhere no one had any preconceived notions about me. When I saw your ad, it felt like, I don't know, like fate, maybe." Jackson nodded slowly, seeming to weigh her words. "And the turtle? What's his story?" The question surprised a small laugh from her. "Mr. Slowpoke was a rescue. I found him abandoned in a park 7 years ago. Just a tiny thing someone had probably bought as a novelty pet and then discarded. The vet said he wouldn't have survived another day. I wasn't planning to keep him, but—" She shrugged. "He needed me. Eventually, he became the one constant in my life. Through job changes, relationships ending, moving apartments, he was always there, plodding along. When everything fell apart, I couldn't bear to give him up too." Something in Jackson's expression shifted, a recognition that seemed to resonate with her words. He broke eye contact, focusing on his meal for several long moments. "The ranch job," he said finally. "It's not glamorous work. Feeding livestock, mending fences, helping with calving in the spring, general maintenance year-round. The previous hand was with me for 15 years before his knees gave out and his daughter convinced him to move to Arizona. I need someone reliable, someone who isn't going to run back to the city at the first sign of hardship." "I'm not running back anywhere," Elena said firmly. "There's nothing to run back to." Jackson studied her, those hazel eyes seeming to look straight through her carefully constructed defenses. "No experience with ranch work at all." "None," she admitted, "but I'm a fast learner. I'm not afraid of hard work, and She hesitated, then finished quietly. "I'm in need of a place that might eventually feel like home." The word, hung between them, weighted with meaning. Jackson set down his spoon and leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "The cabin needs some fixing up. It's been empty since Pete left. There's a leak in the bathroom ceiling I haven't gotten around to patching, and the porch steps are getting rickety." "I can learn to fix those things," Elena said, hope beginning to flutter in her chest. "I'm handy with tools. My father made sure all his children could handle basic home repairs." Jackson nodded, a decision seemingly made. "There's one more thing you should know before you decide to stay." He paused, his expression growing more guarded. "I run this operation alone now. My wife, Sarah. She passed 3 years ago, cancer. Our daughter Lily is away at college in Bozeman. It's just me and about 200 head of cattle, 3 horses, a half-dozen chickens, and an old ranch dog named Buck, who's more interested in napping than working these days." The admission of loss hung in the air between them. Elena recognized the particular quality of grief in his voice. Not the raw, bleeding kind of recent bereavement, but the settled, permanent absence that remains after the initial storm has passed. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said softly. "Thank you." His reply was simple but genuine. He cleared his throat. "The point is, there's just me here most of the time, and you'd be living on the property too. I want to be clear that this is a professional arrangement. The cabin is your private space. Your time off is your own. I'm not looking for—" He faltered slightly. "Complications." Elena felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "I understand completely. I'm here for the job, Mr. Miller. Nothing more." "Jackson," he corrected. "Jackson," she echoed. "I appreciate your directness." He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and rose to his feet. "Let me show you the cabin, then. If it suits you, the job is yours. You can start tomorrow." The cabin sat about 100 yards from the main house. A small, sturdy structure, with a covered porch and windows that caught the last rays of the setting sun. Inside, it was basic but comfortable. A main room with a kitchenette and sitting area, a bedroom just large enough for a double bed and dresser, and a bathroom with an old clawfoot tub. True to Jackson's word, there was a water stain on the bathroom ceiling, and the porch steps creaked ominously under their weight. "It's perfect," Elena said, meaning it. After months of uncertainty, even this simple space represented stability. They stood on the porch as twilight deepened, watching as the first stars appeared in the vast Montana sky. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing across the valley. "Well," Jackson said finally, "I'll let you get settled. There's linens in the bedroom closet, basic supplies in the kitchen. We start at 5:30 tomorrow morning." "I'll be ready," Elena promised. He turned to go, then paused at the bottom of the rickety steps. For a moment, he seemed to be struggling with something. When he looked back up at her, there was an unexpected vulnerability in his expression. "Stay," he said, the word coming out more like a plea than a command. "The ranch needs," he faltered, then finished quietly. "The ranch needs a woman's touch again." Before Elena could respond, he was striding away, his silhouette merging with the gathering darkness. She stood watching until he disappeared into the main house, wondering at the layers of meaning in those simple words. Inside the cabin, Elena unpacked her meager belongings, setting Mr. Slowpoke's terrarium on the kitchen counter where sunlight would reach it in the morning. Her fingers brushed against the small velvet pouch tucked in the corner of her suitcase, the last physical reminder of the life and future she'd once thought certain. She left it where it was, unopened. As she made up the bed with the found linens, Elena allowed herself to consider the man who was now her employer. Jackson Miller carried his grief like an invisible companion, present in the way he moved through spaces designed for more than one person, in the careful way he spoke of the past. She recognized that particular skill, the ability to function, to even appear whole to casual observers, while navigating around an absence that never truly healed. She had her own ghosts after all, not a death, but a betrayal that had cut just as deep, leaving her with scars that had only recently stopped bleeding. Elena had learned the hard way that some wounds never fully close, you simply build a life around them. As darkness settled completely over the Diamondback Ranch, Elena stood at the cabin window, watching the lights glowing in the main house. For the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not quite hope, but perhaps its quieter cousin, possibility. The first week at Diamondback Ranch passed in a blur of aching muscles and new routines. Elena rose before dawn each morning, stumbling bleary-eyed to the main house where Jackson already had coffee brewing. They would drink in companionable silence, watching the sky. "Be plenty of room for you and your cold-blooded companion." Elena placed Mr. Slowpoke's terrarium on a side table, murmuring a quick promise to return, and followed Jackson into a large, country-style kitchen where a pot bubbled on the stove. "I hope you like beef stew," he said, moving to stir the contents. "It's what we've got tonight." "It smells wonderful," Elena replied honestly. "Can I help with anything?" Jackson gestured toward a loaf of bread on the cutting board. "You can slice that if you like. Plates are in that cabinet to your right." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes, the routine of preparing a meal together feeling strangely intimate for two people who had just met. Elena couldn't help noticing the way Jackson moved around his kitchen. Efficient and practiced, but with a hesitation in certain moments that suggested this had once been someone else's domain. As they settled at the large oak table with steaming bowls of stew, Jackson studied her with that same careful gaze. "So, Miss Parker, Elena, please." "Elena," he amended. "Your resume said you worked in corporate marketing for 8 years. What brings a city professional to apply for ranch work in Montana?" The question was direct but not unkind. Elena dipped her spoon into the stew, buying herself a moment to decide how much truth to offer this stranger. "Life changes," she said finally. "The company I worked for downsized after the pandemic fully hit their revenue. Then the housing market in Seattle went crazy, and I couldn't afford to stay after losing my income. I tried moving back to my hometown in Ohio, but—" She trailed off, the humiliation of those weeks still too raw. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "But?" Jackson prompted gently. Elena met his eyes, deciding that if she was going to live and work here, honesty was the only foundation worth building on. But sometimes you can't go home again. Too many expectations, too many people who think they know who you are or should be. I needed a fresh start somewhere no one had any preconceived notions about me. When I saw your ad, it felt like, I don't know, like fate maybe. Jackson nodded slowly, seeming to weigh her words. "And the turtle? What's his story?" The question surprised a small laugh from her. "Mr. Slowpoke was a rescue. I found him abandoned in a park 7 years ago. Just a tiny thing someone had probably bought as a novelty pet and then discarded. The vet said he wouldn't have survived another day. I wasn't planning to keep him, but—" She shrugged. "He needed me. Eventually, he became the one constant in my life. Through job changes, relationships ending, moving apartments, he was always there, plodding along. When everything fell apart, I couldn't bear to give him up too." Something in Jackson's expression shifted, a recognition that seemed to resonate with her words. He broke eye contact, focusing on his meal for several long moments. "The ranch job," he said finally, "it's not glamorous work. Feeding livestock, mending fences, helping with calving in the spring, general maintenance year-round. The previous hand was with me for 15 years before his knees gave out and his daughter convinced him to move to Arizona. I need someone reliable, someone who isn't going to run back to the city at the first sign of hardship." "I'm not running back anywhere," Elena said firmly. "There's nothing to run back to." Jackson studied her, those hazel eyes seeming to look straight through her carefully constructed defenses. "No experience with ranch work at all." "None," she admitted, "but I'm a fast learner. I'm not afraid of hard work, and she hesitated, then finished quietly, "I'm in need of a place that might eventually feel like home." The word, hung between them, weighted with meaning. Jackson set down his spoon and leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "The cabin needs some fixing up. It's been empty since Pete left. There's a leak in the bathroom ceiling I haven't gotten around to patching, and the porch steps are getting rickety." "I can learn to fix those things," Elena said, hope beginning to flutter in her chest. "I'm handy with tools." My father made sure all his children could handle basic home repairs. Jackson nodded, a decision seemingly made. "There's one more thing you should know before you decide to stay." He paused, his expression growing more guarded. "I run this operation alone now. My wife, Sarah. She passed 3 years ago, cancer. Our daughter Lily is away at college in Bozeman. It's just me and about 200 head of cattle, 3 horses, a half-dozen chickens, and an old ranch dog named Buck, who's more interested in napping than working these days." The admission of loss hung in the air between them. Elena recognized the particular quality of grief in his voice. Not the raw, bleeding kind of recent bereavement, but the settled, permanent absence that remains after the initial storm has passed. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said softly. "Thank you." His reply was simple but genuine. He cleared his throat. "The point is, There's just me here most of the time, and you'd be living on the property too. I want to be clear that this is a professional arrangement. The cabin is your private space. Your time off is your own. I'm not looking for—" he faltered slightly. "Complications." Elena felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "I understand completely. I'm here for the job, Mr. Miller. Nothing more." "Jackson," he corrected. "Jackson," she echoed. "I appreciate your directness." He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and rose to his feet. "Let me show you the cabin, then. If it suits you, the job is yours. You can start tomorrow." The cabin sat about 100 yards from the main house. A small, sturdy structure, with a covered porch and windows that caught the last rays of the setting sun. Inside, it was basic but comfortable. A main room with a kitchenette and sitting area, a bedroom just large enough for a double bed and dresser, and a bathroom with an old clawfoot tub. True to Jackson's word, there was a water stain on the bathroom ceiling, and the porch steps creaked ominously under their weight. "It's perfect," Elena said, meaning it. After months of uncertainty, even this simple space represented stability. They stood on the porch as twilight deepened, watching as the first stars appeared in the vast Montana sky. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely cry echoing across the valley. "Well," Jackson said finally, "I'll let you get settled. There's linens in the bedroom closet, basic supplies in the kitchen. We start at 5:30 tomorrow morning." "I'll be ready," Elena promised. He turned to go, then paused at the bottom of the rickety steps. For a moment, he seemed to be struggling with something. When he looked back up at her, there was an unexpected vulnerability in his expression. "Stay," he said, the word coming out more like a plea than a command. "The ranch needs," he faltered, then finished quietly. "The ranch needs a woman's touch again." Before Elena could respond, he was striding away, his silhouette merging with the gathering darkness. She stood watching until he disappeared into the main house, wondering at the layers of meaning in those simple words. Inside the cabin, Elena unpacked her meager belongings, setting Mr. Slowpoke's terrarium on the kitchen counter where sunlight would reach it in the morning. Her fingers brushed against the small velvet pouch tucked in the corner of her suitcase, the last physical reminder of the life and future she'd once thought certain. She left it where it was, unopened. As she made up the bed with the found linens, Elena allowed herself to consider the man who was now her employer. Jackson Miller carried his grief like an invisible companion, present in the way he moved through spaces designed for more than one person, in the careful way he spoke of the past. She recognized that particular skill, the ability to function, to even appear whole to casual observers, while navigating around an absence that never truly healed. She had her own ghosts after all, not a death, but a betrayal that had cut just as deep, leaving her with scars that had only recently stopped bleeding. Elena had learned the hard way that some wounds never fully close, you simply build a life around them. As darkness settled completely over the Diamondback Ranch, Elena stood at the cabin window, watching the lights glowing in the main house. For the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not quite hope, but perhaps its quieter cousin, possibility. The first week at Diamondback Ranch passed in a blur of aching muscles and new routines. Elena rose before dawn each morning, stumbling bleary-eyed to the main house where Jackson already had coffee brewing. They would drink in companionable silence, watching the sky lighten, before he outlined her tasks for the day. The work was physically demanding in ways her corporate job had never been. By sunset each evening, Elena collapsed into the old clawfoot tub, soaking away the day's accumulation of dust, sweat, and minor injuries. Yet despite the exhaustion, she found herself sleeping better than she had in years, lulled by the profound quiet of the countryside and the satisfaction of tangible accomplishments. Jackson proved to be a patient teacher, demonstrating each new skill with a calm efficiency that made even complex tasks seem manageable. He showed her how to mend fences, operate the tractor, recognize signs of illness in the cattle, and 100 other skills essential to ranch life. When she made mistakes, and there were many, his corrections were firm but never harsh. "You're doing fine," he told her on the 5th day, after she'd successfully herded a group of reluctant heifers into a new pasture. "Better than fine, actually. You've got good instincts with the animals." The praise, delivered in his usual understated manner, warmed Elena more than it should have. She was beginning to recognize that Jackson Miller was not a man who offered compliments lightly. What he didn't share easily was himself. Though they worked side by side from sunrise to sunset, conversations rarely strayed beyond the immediate tasks at hand. Elena learned about the ranch, its history, its challenges, its rhythms, but precious little about the man who ran it. Sarah's name was never mentioned again after that first night, and the photographs in the main house seemed to watch their careful dance around personal topics with silent understanding. On her first Sunday off, Elena drove into town for supplies, discovering that Whispering Pines was exactly as small as its welcome sign had suggested. The main street consisted of a general store, a diner, a post office, a small medical clinic, and a combination hardware/feed store. She felt eyes following her as she gathered her purchases. A newcomer was evidently still a novelty in a place this size. "You must be Jackson Miller's new hand," said the white-haired woman at the general store checkout, her bright eyes curious behind thick glasses. "I'm Martha Simmons. My husband and I have owned this place for 40 years. "Elena Parker," she replied, extending her hand. "Nice to meet you." "How are you settling in out at Diamondback?" Martha asked, bagging Elena's purchases with practiced efficiency. "It's good to see Jackson hiring someone new. That place needs more life in it." Elena sensed the undercurrent of meaning in the woman's words. "It's going well, I think. There's a lot to learn." Martha nodded, her expression softening. "Jackson's a good man. Been through more than his share of hardship, but he keeps going. This whole town was heartbroken when Sarah passed. Such a vibrant woman, the backbone of every community event we had, and their girl, Lily, smart as a whip. Got a full scholarship to Montana State." Elena accepted the information gratefully, these small details filling in the outline of Jackson's life that she'd begun to sketch in her mind. "He mentioned his daughter is in college. Does she come home often?" A shadow crossed Martha's face. "Not as much as before. I think it's hard for her. The ranch without her mama. And those two," she gestured vaguely toward the Diamondback, "they're too much alike sometimes. Stubborn as the day is long, both of them." Before Elena could ask more, the bell above the door jingled, and several more customers entered. Martha gave her a warm smile as she handed over her change. "You come back any time, dear. It's nice to see a new face around here." Driving back to the ranch, Elena found herself reflecting on Martha's words. The picture emerging of Jackson was of a man respected by his community, a widower who had somehow kept his operation running despite personal tragedy, a father with a complicated relationship with his daughter. Each new piece of information only seemed to deepen the mystery rather than solve it. As she turned down the long driveway to Diamondback, Elena spotted Jackson on horseback near the eastern pasture, his silhouette straight and strong against the afternoon sun. Something in her chest tightened at the sight, an unwelcome awareness of him not as her employer, but as a man. She pushed the feeling away firmly, reminding herself of his clear boundaries from that first night. She was here for the job, for stability, for a chance to rebuild her life from the ashes of what had come before. Complications were the last thing either of them needed. The cabin welcomed her home, its simple spaces already feeling familiar after just a week. Mr. Slowpoke regarded her with his usual placid expression from his terrarium, now enhanced with rocks and plants from the creek bed. "Well, Mr. S.," she told the turtle as she unpacked her groceries, "I think we might be able to make this work. What do you think?" The turtle blinked slowly, which Elena chose to interpret as agreement. That evening, as darkness fell, a knock at her door surprised her. She opened it to find Jackson standing on the porch, holding a covered dish. "Brought you some dinner?" he said. "Figured you might be tired after your trip to town." The gesture, unexpected and oddly domestic, momentarily flustered her. "That's very kind of you. Would you like to come in?" He hesitated, then nodded, stepping carefully over the threshold, as if entering unfamiliar territory. Elena realized with a start that this was the first time he'd been inside the cabin since showing it to her that first night. "I made some progress on fixing that leak in the bathroom," she told him, taking the dish and setting it on the small kitchen table. Turns out it was just a loose connection in the pipe above. My dad taught me basic plumbing when I was in high school. Jackson looked genuinely impressed. That's been on my to-do list for months. Thank you. Consider it part of my rent, Elena said with a smile. I noticed the porch steps need reinforcing too. I could tackle that next weekend if you have the lumber. We can do it together, he offered, then seemed almost surprised by his own words. I mean, if you'd like the help. I would, Elena said simply. An awkward silence fell between them. Jackson's eyes traveled around the cabin, taking in the small touches she'd added. Wildflowers in a mason jar on the table, a colorful throw blanket over the back of the couch, her books arranged on the previously empty shelves. You've made it homey, he observed. It's starting to feel that way, she admitted. His gaze landed on Mr. Slowpoke, who was methodically consuming a piece of lettuce. The corner of Jackson's mouth twitched upward. How's the reptile settling in? He approves of Montana so far. The sunshine coming through that kitchen window is his favorite spot. Jackson nodded, then seemed to realize he was lingering. Well, I should let you enjoy your evening. Early start tomorrow. We're moving the herd to the north pasture. I'll be ready, Elena assured him. At the door, he paused again, turning back with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. I'm glad you're here, Elena, he said quietly. Good night. The door closed behind him before she could respond, leaving her with the lingering warmth of his words and the curious feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. As summer gave way to autumn, the ranch's pace changed with the season. The days grew shorter, the mornings frostier, and the workload evolved to include preparations for the coming winter. Elena found herself increasingly trusted with responsibilities beyond basic chores. Jackson now consulted her on decisions, valued her observations about the cattle, and had even taught her to ride Daisy, the gentlest of his 3 horses. The cabin underwent a gradual transformation as well. Together, they had replaced the rickety porch steps, repainted the exterior, and installed new insulation in preparation for winter. Each improvement felt like a statement of permanence, a quiet acknowledgement that her presence at Diamondback was no longer viewed as temporary. Their evenings had developed a routine of their own. 3 or 4 nights a week, they would share dinner, sometimes at the main house, sometimes at her cabin. The conversations that had once been limited to ranch business slowly expanded to include books they had read, films they had seen, and eventually, cautious forays into their lives before Diamondback. Elena learned that Jackson had grown up on this very ranch, the only child of parents who had worked the land until their deaths a decade ago. He had been to college, 2 years at Montana State, studying agricultural science, before I realized everything I needed to know was right here, and had met Sarah at a county fair where she was showing her family's prize horses. She wasn't impressed with me at first, he admitted one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Said I was too serious, too set in my warning. His daughter's smile didn't reach her eyes. What? It's true. You mentioned hiring a new ranch hand months ago, but somehow failed to mention she was a woman who's apparently comfortable enough to be cooking in our kitchen. The emphasis on "our" wasn't subtle. Elena felt her cheeks warm but kept her expression neutral. Your father's been teaching me the ropes around here. I help out with meals sometimes as part of the arrangement. Jackson cleared his throat. Elena's been an invaluable addition to Diamondback. She's got a real knack with the livestock, and she's already fixed half the things on my repair list. Lily raised an eyebrow, setting her designer purse on the counter. How resourceful! And what exactly brought you to our little corner of nowhere, Elena? Most women with your... She paused, her gaze sweeping over Elena again. Qualifications usually prefer urban settings. Lily, that's enough, Jackson said firmly. Elena is here as both my employee and my guest. I expect you to show her the same respect you'd show anyone under this roof. A tense silence followed his words. Elena busied herself checking on the pot roast, giving father and daughter a moment to navigate this clearly fraught reunion. Something smells good, Lily finally said, her tone marginally softer. Did you make Mom's pot roast recipe? I did, Jackson replied, the relief evident in his voice at this small olive branch. Though Elena added her own touches. She's a much better cook than I am. Dinner was a careful dance of conversation, with Jackson working to bridge the chasm between the two women. Lily spoke animatedly about her studies in business administration, her campus activities, and her friends in Bozeman, clearly painting a picture of a rich, fulfilling life far from the ranch. When asked direct questions about herself, Elena answered honestly but briefly, acutely aware of Lily's scrutiny. "So you just answered a random job ad and moved across the country?" Lily asked as they were finishing the apple pie. "That seems like a rather dramatic life change." Elena met the younger woman's gaze steadily. "Sometimes dramatic changes are exactly what we need." "And there was nothing keeping you where you were? No family? No significant other?" "Lily," Jackson interjected, but Elena placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's a fair question," she said. "No, there wasn't anything keeping me there. My parents retired to Florida years ago, and my brother lives in California with his family. As for relationships..." She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was engaged, but it ended badly." Montana represented a fresh start. Something in Lily's expression shifted, not quite softening, but perhaps a flicker of reluctant understanding. "I see." Later, as Elena was washing dishes while Jackson and Lily caught up in the living room, she overheard snippets of their conversation. "Not what I expected," Lily was saying, her voice low. "What did you expect?" Jackson's reply was equally quiet. "I don't know. When you said you'd hired someone new, I pictured some weathered old cowboy, not a..." The rest of her sentence was lost as Elena turned on the faucet. When she finished in the kitchen, Elena made her excuses, feeling it was best to give father and daughter time alone. Jackson walked her to the door, stepping outside briefly. "I'm sorry about Lily's behavior," he said, his voice pitched low. "She's protective." "It's understandable," Elena replied. "She doesn't know me, and she cares about you." "I'd probably react the same way if it were my father." Jackson's expression was troubled in the porch light. "She's changed so much since going away to college. Sometimes I hardly recognize the little girl who used to follow me around the ranch." "That's part of growing up," Elena said gently. "Testing boundaries, establishing independence. It doesn't mean she loves you any less." He nodded, though the worry didn't leave his eyes. "Will I see you tomorrow? I'll be in the barn early. The tack needs cleaning, and that loose board in the second stall won't fix itself." "You don't have to work tomorrow. It's Saturday." Elena smiled. "I know, but I want to. Besides, Mr. Slowpoke says I'm getting too soft sleeping past 5:30. That earned her a small smile in return. That turtle is a harsh taskmaster. They stood for a moment in comfortable silence, neither quite ready to part. Finally, Elena stepped back. "Good night, Jackson. Enjoy your time with Lily." "Good night, Elena." She felt his eyes on her as she walked to her cabin. The weight of his gaze, a tangible thing in the crisp autumn night. The next morning brought clear skies and a biting chill that hinted at the winter to come. Elena was in the barn by 6, methodically cleaning bridles and saddles as the sun began to illuminate the space through dusty windows. The familiar work was meditative, allowing her mind to wander. She was so absorbed in her task that she didn't hear the barn door open, startling when Lily's voice broke the silence. "So this is where you hide out?" Elena looked up to find Jackson's daughter watching her from the doorway, dressed surprisingly casually in jeans and a fleece pullover, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the protective armor of designer clothes and perfect makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "Not hiding," Elena replied, setting aside the bridle she'd been cleaning. "Just getting an early start." Lily stepped further into the barn, her eyes taking in the neat organization of tools and supplies. Elena's contribution to what had been a rather chaotic space when she first arrived. "Dad says you've made a lot of improvements around here." Elena shrugged. "Just trying to earn my keep." Lily wandered over to Daisy's stall, where the gentle mare whickered a greeting. "This was Mom's horse," she said, stroking the animal's nose. "Dad could never bring himself to sell her after." The unfinished sentence hung in the air. Elena remained silent, sensing that any response would be an intrusion on this moment of remembrance. "He still wears his wedding ring," Lily said abruptly, turning to face Elena. "Did you notice that?" The question caught Elena off guard with its directness. "Yes," she admitted. "I noticed." Lily's expression was challenging. "And that doesn't bother you?" "Why would it bother me?" Elena asked carefully. "Please," Lily scoffed. "I've seen the way you look at him. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching." Heat rose to Elena's cheeks, but she met the younger woman's gaze steadily. "Your father and I have a professional relationship, Lily. We're also becoming friends. That's all." "For now," Lily countered. "But you want more. And maybe he does too, even if he doesn't realize it yet." Elena set down the cloth she'd been holding, giving Lily her full attention. "Your mother was clearly an extraordinary woman who was deeply loved by both you and your father. Nothing and no one will ever change that." Something flickered in Lily's eyes. Pain, recognition, a grudging respect. "You didn't know her." "No," Elena agreed softly. "But I see her influence everywhere on this ranch. In the gardens that I'm trying to restore, in the way the house is arranged, in how your father's voice changes when he speaks of her, and most of all, in you." Lily blinked rapidly, turning away to hide sudden tears. "This place is all I have left of her," she said, her voice barely audible. "When Dad sells it—" "Sells it," Elena interrupted, genuinely surprised. "Your father has no intention of selling Diamond back. He told me this land has been in your family for generations." Lily turned back, confusion evident on her face. "But he has to sell. The ranch has been losing money for years. The last 3 seasons have barely broken even, and with the drought affecting the hay production this year." She trailed off, studying Elena's expression. "He didn't tell you, did he?" A cold weight settled in Elena's stomach. "No," she said quietly. "He didn't." Lily's laugh held no humor. "Typical Dad. Always trying to protect everyone. Never sharing the burden." She sighed, leaning against Daisy's stall. After Mom died, he couldn't focus on the business side of things. By the time he got his head above water emotionally, the ranch was already in trouble financially. He's too proud to admit it, but the bank has been pressuring him. That's why I've been pushing him to sell on his own terms before they force the issue. The revelation struck Elena like a physical blow. The ranch that had become her sanctuary, the place where she had begun to rebuild her life, it was as fragile and impermanent as everything else she had lost. "There must be something that can be done," she said, her mind already racing through possibilities. "Have you looked into agricultural grants? Alternative revenue streams? The location is spectacular. There could be tourism potential or specialty breeding programs that would command premium prices." Lily was watching her with an odd expression. "You really care about this place, don't you? About him?" Elena didn't bother to deny it. "Yes," she said simply. "I do." Something shifted in Lily's demeanor. Not quite acceptance, but perhaps a tentative reassessment. "Dad's stubborn. He won't listen to me about modernizing or diversifying." "Maybe he'd listen to you." "I can try," Elena offered, "though I'm not sure my opinion carries much weight." Lily's smile was small but genuine. "I think it carries more than you realize." She straightened, seemingly having come to a decision. "I'm supposed to tell you Dad wants us all to have breakfast together. That's why I came looking for you. I'll just finish up here and—" "He's making his famous blueberry pancakes," Lily interrupted. "Trust me, you don't want to miss those, however dire the financial situation." It was an olive branch, awkwardly extended but sincere. Elena accepted it with a smile. Blueberry pancakes do sound hard to resist. They walked back to the house together, an uneasy truce established between them. The revelation about Diamondback's precarious future weighed heavily on Elena's mind, but she determined to set it aside for now. The morning called for pancakes and tentative new beginnings. Breakfast was notably more relaxed than dinner had been. Lily, while not exactly warm, was at least civil, occasionally including Elena in the conversation rather than speaking around her. Jackson, clearly relieved by this development, was more animated than Elena had ever seen him, telling stories about Lily's childhood adventures on the ranch that made his daughter alternately groan with embarrassment and laugh with genuine delight. "Dad, please stop," Lily begged after a particularly mortifying tale involving her 7-year-old self, a prize bull, and an ill-advised attempt to decorate its horns with ribbons. "Elena's gonna think I was a complete wild child." "The evidence suggests you were," Elena teased gently, testing the waters of this fragile new dynamic. To her relief, Lily grinned. "I was a terror. Mom used to say I had enough energy for 3 children and the impulse control of none." "Sarah had your number from day one," Jackson agreed, a softness entering his expression at the memory. "You never could pull anything over on her." "Unlike you," Lily countered. "I had you wrapped around my little finger." "Still do," he admitted ruefully. The moment of family warmth twisted something in Elena's chest, joy at witnessing it, sorrow at being forever on its periphery, and a sudden, sharp longing for what might have been in her own life if things had gone differently. After breakfast, Lily announced her intention to drive into town to visit old friends. "I'll be back for dinner," she promised, giving her father a quick hug. To Elena's surprise, Lily turned to her next. "Thanks for the conversation in the barn." It was illuminating. When she'd gone, Jackson turned to Elena with undisguised curiosity. "What conversation in the barn?" Elena busied herself clearing the breakfast dishes. "Just girl talk." "Uh-huh," he said skeptically. "The same girl who arrived yesterday looking like she wanted to run you off the property with a pitchfork?" "Lily's protective of you," Elena said, "and of this place. She has every right to be cautious around newcomers." Jackson studied her face carefully. "What did she tell you?" Elena hesitated, weighing her options. The financial troubles were clearly something Jackson had deliberately kept from her, but pretending ignorance now felt dishonest. "She mentioned that the ranch has been having some difficulties," she said carefully. "Financial ones." Jackson's expression closed off immediately, the openness of the breakfast table vanishing behind a mask of reserve. "Lily shouldn't have bothered you with that. It's nothing for you to worry about." "It's not a bother," Elena said, "and if Diamondback is in trouble, I want to help. This place has become important to me too, Jackson." He turned away, his shoulders tense. "I've got it under control." "Do you?" Elena pressed gently. "Because from what Lily said, the situation sounds serious." "It's my problem," he said, his voice hard, "not yours." The words stung more than they should have. "Right," Elena said, stepping back. "Your ranch, your problem. I'm just the hired help." Jackson winced, turning back to her with regret clear in his eyes. "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Elena set down the plate she'd been gathering with deliberate care. "You hired me to help with the ranch work, Jackson. That's what I've been doing. But apparently, there are parts of this ranch you don't trust me with." "It's not about trust," he insisted. "It's about not burdening you with troubles that aren't yours to bear." "That's not your decision to make," Elena countered. "I'm a grown woman who has faced her own share of difficulties. I don't need to be sheltered like some fragile thing that might break at the first sign of hardship." They stood facing each other. Across the kitchen, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Jackson sighed, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture of discomfort. "You're right," he conceded. "I should have told you. It's just, I've been handling everything alone for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to let someone help." The admission, so honest in its vulnerability, diffused Elena's anger immediately. "Then let me remind you," she said softly, starting with the dishes. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "The dishes?" "Partnership begins with the small things," she said, turning on the tap. "You wash, I'll dry." Standing side by side at the sink, their shoulders occasionally brushing as they worked, Elena felt something shift between them, a new understanding, a deeper connection forged through this small admission of need on Jackson's part. "It started after Sarah died," he said quietly as they were finishing up. "I was in a fog for months, barely functioning enough to keep the basic operations going. By the time I came out of it, we'd missed opportunities. made poor decisions, taken on debt to cover expenses. He dried his hands on a dish towel, his expression distant. The drought these last 2 years hasn't helped. Feed costs are up, cattle prices are down, the math just doesn't work anymore. Have you looked into diversification? Elena asked. There might be ways to supplement the cattle operation. Jackson nodded. I've considered a few options. The problem is most of them require capital up front, capital I don't have. What about a business loan? The bank's already extended more credit than they're comfortable with, he admitted. They want to see a solid business plan for turning things around before they'll consider lending more. Elena thought of her corporate background, the years spent creating marketing strategies and business proposals. I could help with that, she offered. Writing business plans was part of my job in Seattle. Jackson looked at her with surprise that quickly shifted to consideration. You'd do that? Of course, she said simply. Diamondback gave me a chance when I needed one. I'd like to return the favor. Something complex moved behind his eyes. Gratitude, relief, and perhaps something warmer that Elena didn't dare name. Thank you, he said, the words carrying weight beyond their simplicity. Partners, remember? She reminded him, bumping his shoulder lightly with her own. We'll figure this out. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. With Lily in town, Elena and Jackson took advantage of the mild weather to complete several outdoor projects they'd been postponing. They worked side by side, replacing worn shingles on the equipment shed, the rhythm of their movements synchronized after months of laboring together. As the afternoon waned, they sat on the porch steps of the main house, sharing a thermos of coffee and the comfortable silence of mutual exhaustion. Lily seems to have warmed up to you, Jackson observed, watching as Elena massaged her sore shoulder. I wouldn't go that far, she replied with a small smile. Let's call it an armed neutrality. Jackson chuckled. That's more than I expected after last night. What did you two really talk about in the barn? Elena considered how much to share. She's worried about you, she said finally. About this place. And she's grieving still. The ranch is connected to her memories of her mother. Jackson's expression sobered. I know. That's part of why I've been so determined to save it. It's not just my heritage. It's Sarah's legacy too. The gardens she planted, the rooms she decorated, the life we built together. He stared out at the mountains, their peaks now tinged with gold in the late afternoon light. Losing the ranch would feel like losing her all over again. The raw honesty of his confession caught Elena off guard. It was the most he had ever revealed of his ongoing grief, of the wound that still clearly shaped his every decision. You wouldn't be losing her, Elena said gently. Sarah lives in your memories, in Lily, in the values and love you shared. No bank can take that away. Jackson turned to look at her, something unreadable in his expression. When did you get so wise, Elena Parker? Somewhere between corporate burnout and mucking out stalls, she replied with a small smile. Turns out horse manure is remarkably clarifying for one's perspective on life. He laughed then, the sound warming her more than the coffee ever could. I'm glad you answered that ad, he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cooling air. So am I, she replied simply. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Elena found herself acutely aware of his proximity, of the way the setting sun burnished his features in gold and shadow, of how easy it would be to lean just slightly closer. The sound of Lily's SUV turning into the driveway broke the spell. Jackson stood, offering Elena a hand up that she accepted despite her protesting muscles. Here we go again, he murmured, a hint of resignation in his voice. It'll be fine, Elena assured him, though her own nerves fluttered at the prospect of another evening navigating the complex dynamics between father and daughter. But as Lily approached the porch, her expression was notably lighter than when she'd left that morning. She carried several shopping bags and wore a secretive smile that reminded Elena of the mischievous child from Jackson's breakfast stories. You two look like you've been working hard, Lily observed, taking in their disheveled appearance. Someone had to hold down the fort while you were out having fun, Jackson teased. Lily rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Well, your reward for hard labor is that I'm cooking dinner tonight. My treat. Jackson raised an eyebrow in surprise. You? Cook? Since when? Since I took that culinary course last semester, Lily replied with dignity. Some of us are interested in expanding our horizons beyond beef and potatoes. I'm officially intrigued, Elena said, earning a genuine smile from Lily. Good, the younger woman declared, because I'm making my specialty, Thai green curry. And yes, Dad, before you ask, I brought my own ingredients. I remembered your pathetic spice cabinet. As they followed Lily into the house, Jackson leaned close to Elena's ear. Be prepared, he whispered. Her specialty nearly burned my taste buds off last time. Elena bit back a laugh, oddly touched to be included in this small family joke. The evening ahead suddenly seemed full of promise rather than tension. Curry-induced discomfort notwithstanding. Lily's Thai curry proved to be both delicious and mercifully moderate in its spiciness, though Jackson made a show of reaching for his water glass after each bite, earning playful eye rolls from his daughter. The dinner conversation flowed more naturally than Elena had dared hope, with Lily sharing stories about her college experiences and even asking Elena thoughtful questions about her previous career in marketing. So you were actually pretty high up in your company? Lily asked, impressed, despite herself. Why would you leave that for... She gestured vaguely at the ranch beyond the windows. For mucking stalls and mending fences? Elena finished with a smile. Because success isn't just about job titles or paychecks. It's about waking up every morning with purpose, about going to bed tired in a way that feels earned. But didn't you miss the excitement of the city? The opportunities? Elena considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss certain aspects. Good Thai food without having to drive an hour, for instance, she said, raising her fork in appreciation of Lily's cooking. But the corporate world has its own price. I was always chasing the next deadline, the next promotion, constantly available through my phone. I barely had time to notice my own life passing by. Jackson, who had been quiet during this exchange, looked at Elena with a new understanding. Is that why you keep that turtle? To remind yourself to slow down? The question surprised a laugh from her. I've never thought about it that way, but maybe you're right. Mr. Slowpoke does have a way of putting things in perspective. He's completely content with simple pleasures. Sunshine, fresh greens, the occasional strawberry. There's wisdom in that approach to life. Mom used to say something similar, Lily said softly, her gaze distant with memory. She called it living close to the ground, being present for the small moments that make up a life instead of always looking ahead to some imagined better future. The mention of Sarah, offered voluntarily and without tension, felt like a gift. Elena accepted it with a nod, not trusting herself to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. After dinner, as they lingered over coffee and the remains of an apple crumble Lily had picked up from the diner in town, Martha Simmons insisted I bring it home. Apparently she's your newest fan, she'd told Elena. The conversation turned to the ranch's financial situation. I've been thinking about what we discussed earlier, Jackson said, addressing Elena but including Lily with his gaze. About diversification options for Diamondback. Lily set down her coffee. They moved through the house with practiced efficiency, locating flashlights and candles, checking the wood supply for the fireplace, and filling containers with water. Through the windows, the storm intensified, the wind howling around the eaves like a living thing. You shouldn't try to make it back to your cabin in this, Jackson said as they finished their preparations. The visibility's almost zero, and the temperature's dropping fast. The guest room is made up. You should stay here tonight. The practical suggestion nonetheless carried implications that made Elena's pulse quicken. She'd never spent the night in the main house before, had never crossed that invisible boundary between professional distance and personal intimacy that they'd both so carefully maintained. If you're sure, she said, trying to sound casual, I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition, he assured her. It's common sense. Besides, he added with a small smile, I'd rest easier knowing you were safe here, rather than worrying about you out in that cabin alone if the power goes. The concern in his voice was genuine, and Elena found herself nodding. All right, thank you. Are you hungry? He asked, moving toward the kitchen. I could throw together something simple for dinner. I'm starving, actually, she admitted. All that snow shoveling worked up an appetite. They prepared the meal together, a rustic pasta dish with ingredients from the well-stocked pantry, moving around each other in the kitchen, with the easy coordination of people accustomed to working as a team. As they ate at the kitchen table, the lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. "That was a warning shot," Jackson said, glancing up at the ceiling fixture. "I'll get the fire going in the living room, just in case." By the time they'd cleaned up after dinner, a cheerful blaze was crackling in the stone fireplace, casting the living room in a warm golden glow. Outside, the storm continued unabated, snow piling against the windows, the wind finding every crack and crevice in the old house's structure to create an eerie symphony of whispers and moans. Elena found herself drawn to the fire's warmth, settling onto the comfortable sofa while Jackson poured them each a small glass of amber liquid from a rarely used decanter. "Sarah's favorite," he explained, handing her a glass. 18-year-old Scotch. She said it was the only proper drink for a blizzard. The casual mention of his late wife, offered without tension or grief, felt like another threshold crossed. Elena accepted the glass, raising it slightly in acknowledgement. "To Sarah, then," she said softly. "And her excellent taste in storm provisions?" Jackson's smile held gratitude as he settled beside her, not too close but near enough that the space between them hummed with awareness. "To Sarah," he echoed. The Scotch was smooth and warming, its complex flavors unfolding on Elena's tongue as she sipped slowly. The fire popped and hissed, sending occasional sparks dancing up the chimney. Outside, the storm's fury continued unabated, but within the circle of firelight, time seemed to slow, creating a pocket of tranquility amid the chaos of the elements. "I never thanked you properly," Jackson said after a comfortable silence. "For what? For answering that ad, for taking a chance on this place, for bringing your turtle and your marketing expertise and your fresh perspective to a ranch that was slowly dying along with its owner." The raw honesty of his words caught Elena off guard. "You weren't dying, Jackson." "Wasn't I?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "Going through the motions day after day, letting everything around me gradually decay while I told myself I was honoring Sarah's memory by changing nothing?" He shook his head. "That's not living, that's just existing." Elena understood all too well. After the engagement ended, I felt the same way. Like I was just occupying space, going through required motions without any real connection to my own life. "What changed for you?" he asked, turning to look at her directly, the firelight casting half his face in shadow, the other half in gold. "I decided to stop waiting for life to happen to me," she said simply. "To stop being a passive recipient of whatever circumstances threw my way. The corporate job, the city apartment, the fiancé who was supposed to complete me, none of that was working anymore. So I packed what mattered," she smiled, thinking of Mr. Slowpoke in his terrarium, "and started driving. No real destination in mind, until I saw your ad in that small-town newspaper." "Fate," Jackson murmured, echoing her words from that first night at the dinner table. "Maybe," Elena conceded. "Or maybe just the courage to recognize an opportunity when it presented itself, even if it wasn't wrapped in the package I expected." Jackson nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Like a woman showing up at my door with a suitcase and a turtle, when I thought I was hiring an experienced ranch hand." "Exactly like that," Elena laughed softly. "Life rarely gives us what we think we want. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead." "And what do you need, Elena?" Jackson asked, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the storm outside. The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Before she could formulate an answer, the lights flickered dramatically, then plunged the house into darkness, leaving only the firelight to illuminate the space. "Perfect timing," Elena murmured, grateful for the momentary distraction as Jackson rose to retrieve the flashlights they'd prepared earlier. "The generator should kick in for the essential systems," he explained, handing her a light. "Heat, refrigerator, well pump, but the rest will have to wait until the power company can get out here, which won't be until the storm passes." The sudden shift to emergency mode gave them both a welcome focus outside the intensity of their conversation. They moved through the house, checking systems, adjusting the thermostat to conserve fuel for the generator, making sure everything was secure. When they returned to the living room, the fire had settled into a steady glow, bathing the space in warm, flickering light. Outside, the storm's fury seemed to have intensified, the wind howling with renewed vigor, rattling the windows in their frames. "Looks like we're in for a long night," Jackson observed, adding another log to the fire. "At least we're prepared." Elena settled back onto the sofa, drawing an afghan around her shoulders against the subtle chill that permeated the old house, despite the heating system. "I've always loved storms," she admitted. "There's something exhilarating about being safe and warm while nature rages outside." "The contrast makes both more meaningful," Jackson agreed, resuming his seat beside her. "You can't truly appreciate shelter without having felt the storm." The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. They had both weathered personal storms, different in nature but similar in impact, that made their current haven all the more precious. "I never thought I'd find this again," Elena said softly, the firelight making confession easier somehow. "A sense of belonging, purpose. After everything fell apart in Seattle, I convinced myself those things weren't meant for me." "I know that feeling," Jackson replied. "After Sarah died, I couldn't imagine ever moving forward. It seemed like a betrayal even to try. So I just stopped. Froze everything in place." He gestured around the room, which Elena now realized had probably remained largely unchanged since his wife's passing, as if preserving the physical surroundings could somehow keep her presence alive. "And did it?" Elena asked gently. Jackson was quiet for a long moment, his profile outlined in gold by the firelight. "No," he finally said. "All it did was trap me in grief. And Lily too, by extension. Sarah would have hated that. She was always about growth, change, making things better." "She sounds remarkable." She was. His voice held not just sorrow now, but genuine fondness, the kind that comes when grief has mellowed enough to allow happy memories to resurface. Strong-willed, creative, fiercely loving. She could light up a room just by walking into it. Elena smiled, picturing the woman from the photographs around the house, vibrant, dark-haired, with Lily's determined chin and expressive eyes. "I can see her in Lily, that same spirit." "Yes," Jackson agreed, his expression softening. "More and more lately. This weekend especially, seeing her take charge of the Thanksgiving plans, wanting to go through Sarah's things, it's like watching her step into her heritage but in her own way." "That's a gift," standing on the cabin porch as Jackson walked away in the darkness. "I never expected to find a home, people who would come to matter to me more than I thought possible. A future I could believe in again." "Elena," Jackson began, but she shook her head, needing to finish. "I'm not staying out of obligation, Jackson. I'm staying because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Doing work that matters, with people who matter even more." The space between them on the sofa seemed to contract, the air charged with unspoken feelings. Jackson reached out slowly, his hand finding hers atop the afghan, his touch warm and certain. "I never expected you," he said, his voice low and intimate in the firelit room. "Never imagined that a woman with a corporate background and a rescue turtle would walk into my life and change everything. Make me see possibilities again, in the ranch and in myself." His fingers interlaced with hers, the simple contact sending warmth spiraling through her. "When Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd had my one great love and the rest would just be existing, honoring her memory by keeping everything the same. And now?" Elena asked softly. "Now I understand that the greatest disservice I could do to her memory is to stop living." His gaze held hers steadily, unwavering in its honesty. "Sarah loved life, all of it, the joy and the struggle, the beauty and the mess. She wouldn't want me frozen in the past. She'd want me to find happiness again, to keep growing, changing, building something meaningful." As if to punctuate his words, the wind outside rose to a crescendo, rattling the windows with sudden fury before subsiding again. The fire popped loudly, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney, momentarily brightening the room before returning to its steady glow. "I'm not asking for promises," Jackson continued, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on the back of her hand. "We both know how fragile those can be. I'm just asking for a chance, to see where this might lead, to explore these feelings that I think we both have, but have been too cautious to acknowledge." The request, so reasonable and yet so profound, touched Elena deeply. This man, who had suffered such loss, who had struggled back from the brink of giving up, was offering not grand declarations or desperate passion, but something far more valuable: honest emotion, genuine connection, and the courage to begin again. "I'd like that," she said simply, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. Very much. Something in Jackson's expression shifted then, relief giving way to a quiet joy that transformed his features, erasing years of strain and sorrow. Slowly giving her every opportunity to pull away, he raised his free hand to her cheek, his touch feather-light against her skin. "May I?" he asked, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips. In answer, Elena leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the language of touch. When they parted, both slightly breathless, the look they shared held wonder and certainty in equal measure. Outside, the blizzard continued unabated, snow piling against the windows, wind searching the eaves. But within the circle of firelight, Elena Parker, who had arrived at Diamondback Ranch with nothing but a suitcase, a turtle, and the fragile hope of a fresh start, found herself no longer searching, no longer running, but finally, irrevocably, home. In that moment, as Jackson drew her closer, his arms strong and sure around her, Elena understood that sometimes the greatest journeys aren't measured in miles traveled or destinations reached, but in the courage to open one's heart again after loss, to stand in the ruins of what once was and begin, patiently and with hope, to build something new. Mr. Slowpoke, tucked safely in his terrarium in Elena's cabin, would have to wait until morning for his breakfast lettuce. His human had found her place at last, not in the sleek corporate offices of Seattle or the familiar streets of her Ohio hometown, but here in the wild beauty of Montana, with a man who had once said, "Stay, the ranch needs a woman," but had really meant, "Stay, I need you," and she had. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.